So here I am at the Red and Black Cafe in the one of the trendier inner southeast neighborhoods, Portland, Oregon, at the corner of 12th and Oak. And this is kind of a landmark place on some YouTube stuff. But to give an idea that the background in the neighborhood, it's one of the quasi-gentrified hipster neighborhoods here in Portland, with this St. Francis complex here is part of a homeless shelter thing with the Catholic Church. So you'll see kind of like liveaboard vehicles, public garden, public facility type stuff, and Red and Black Cafe, which became famous a couple years ago because a uniformed police officer had gone in for coffee and they had asked him to leave. And what you have to realize is that this place is right across the street from a park and kind of a homeless center area. It's relatively empty right now because of the season. Okay, the street people scene here is very seasonal, and when they are in, it's in the winter. There's warming shelters and stuff like that. So they go in for a lot of that kind of stuff, and then in the summertime they're out. So this is kind of their turf, and their presence here is relatively sponsored by the property owners. Okay, this isn't a situation where their presence is highly unwelcome. It's really associated with this church organization and the charitable organizations that are here, and providing services for a lot of these people, and some resources for them, some of which are transitional. They'll eventually be brought into the welfare system and given home shelter type stuff, which quite often is in this neighborhood. These are not, for the most part, single family dwellings. They're houses, a lot of which were built as rooming houses to begin with for the crews of ships that used to port here in Portland. But so this is a park normally commonly allowed for somebody to be napping in a park or something like that. So the background on the Red and Black Cafe is that it's really their turf. It's here, and while there are complaints about some of this stuff with the homeless people, a lot of them are sourced with service providers, other homeless people, that sort of a thing. This isn't a neighborhood where, let's say, move in, fix up, mow everything down, and rebuild it type of developers would be really all that welcome, even from the present property owners. So we're going to go inside, see if these people will consent to being on video. The other thing to understand about this is it's a collective-owned, worker-owned business. On the inside of the Red and Black Cafe, and I've got kind of limited permission to film the people here, but they're kind of into the anarchist thing, right? And so a lot of that issue with the police presence had to do with the theme of the place, and they wanted to assert property rights over what they own the property. It's a worker-owned collective, so that's kind of how they're doing things. The other thing is they work with homeless advocacy, homeless rights. One of the things involved here in Portland is a street roots deal, and fortunately the guy who was in this news article from 2013 is here today, 2014, because it's kind of a hangout for the people who are on their way to a little bit more stable lifestyle, but still kind of living under the grid. So we'll talk to T here in a little bit. T, he's one of the guys hanging out here, but also you've been a vendor for Street Roots. You've been covered in other news articles, stuff like that. And at this place, this is kind of considered kind of home station turf as far as people who, for whatever reasons, have ended up on a street or trying to transition off of that. And you're one of the people who kind of helps people navigate some of that once they fell into that point. And a lot of times we've been talking before I turned the camera on about a little bit about what you do. If you want to talk about some of that too.
some people need some mental health issues. I help navigate them to the Cascadia and a few other little mental health organizations, help them get housing. And some of them have a drug problem. When they're actually ready to go get cleaned up and get housing, I help them navigate the system that way. Depending on what the drug problem is, it depends on how far it goes, how fast. But you know, women are probably easier to get situated than men, but it doesn't change the fact that people need help and are looking for help and trying to get themselves right. And then I kind of act as a sounding board for people who just lost their jobs.
Mm-hmm. And it's just a matter of getting onto the next step back up in the ladder and not necessarily being a part of what clings to people to bring them down or something like that. And one of the things I've noticed about this place and, you know, what I would generally see around here, nobody's propositioning me to buy dope. Nobody's trying to rob anybody. It's really not a violent crime place. So just because maybe uniformed police were thrown out of here a while back, it doesn't mean this became a horribly violent place, even though we would say there's less rule of law here because there's less of a police presence. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's become a more dangerous place. I mean, generally speaking.
You know, this is one of the safest places I know of around. They got a policy act, a safety act for everybody. Whether they're gender issues, transsexual, political views, religious views, have issues with. As an addict or whatever, they let everybody come in. As long as they're not a problem, they don't mess with them. Mm-hmm. Everybody can come in, everybody can do what they do. And for the most part, people get along because they don't allow trouble in here. What they don't allow is the police to come in and start intimidating people and maybe get too forceful because they do.
Right, like doing a hard eyeball look, and you know, obviously the guy's armed. Obviously, they're in a position to want to control or dominate if anything that comes up, and it's a matter of escalating force versus de-escalating. Because one thing I noticed at the door, it's not like people are being searched for weapons. It's not like there's any viewpoints would be against anybody's other constitutional rights. It's just a matter of not trying to cultivate an intimidating atmosphere by having, the thug at the door type thing or that sort of a presence, whether they're, whether it's a police uniform or private security or something in that effect. But anyway, I'm going to finish up my chips and we'll talk a little bit later.